Here is the full script. Nobody saw it coming. Not the analysts, not the airlines, not even the people inside Boeing who had spent the last 5 years watching everything fall apart. A number leaked. 100. 100 Boeing 777X aircraft. And the buyer wasn't Emirates. It wasn't Qatar. It was China, the country that had essentially banned Boeing from its skies. To understand why this matters, you have to go back to the moment Boeing stopped being untouchable. Because there was a moment, a specific, definable moment, when the most dominant aircraft manufacturer in history started losing China. Not slowly, not quietly. All at once, it was the 737 MAX, 2 crashes. 346 people dead. And when the world grounded the aircraft, China was the first to act and the last to recertify. While the FAA and European regulators eventually brought the MAX back, Chinese authorities took years longer. Years during which Boeing salespeople couldn't get meetings. Years during which Airbus moved in and never left. By 2022, Air China, China Eastern, China Southern, the 3 carriers that collectively move more passengers than most countries' entire aviation industries, had all committed heavily to the Airbus A350. Boeing wasn't just losing orders, it was being systematically replaced. And then China did something that made the situation feel permanent. It started flying the C919 COMAC's narrow-body jet, years in development. Subsidized by the Chinese government, finally entered commercial service. It wasn't just an aircraft, it was a message. China was telling the world, and telling Boeing specifically, that it no longer needed to depend on Western manufacturers, that the days of writing massive checks to Seattle were numbered. Aviation analysts started asking out loud whether China would ever be a serious Boeing market again. The question is, what makes the leak so explosive? Because if the reports are accurate, and the sourcing here comes from Simple Flying and DJ's Aviation, both citing people familiar with the negotiations, China isn't just buying a few Boeing jets to smooth over diplomatic tensions. It's preparing to commit to approximately 100 777X wide-body aircraft, possibly as part of a broader package that could total 500 jets, including 737 MAX narrow-bodies, the kind of order that doesn't get assembled quietly, the kind of number that, when it lands, reshapes an entire industry. But here's what nobody is talking about yet. The timing of this leak isn't an accident. And once you understand why this is surfacing now, and who benefits from it surfacing now, the story gets a lot more complicated. The 777X was supposed to enter service in 2020. That was the plan. Boeing had invested tens of billions of dollars developing the aircraft, the largest twin-engine jet ever built, with folding wingtips, GE9X engines, and a composite wing that Boeing's engineers described as a generational leap in aerodynamics. Airlines were lined up. Emirates alone had committed to over 100. The future looked locked in. Then the delays started. Technical certification issues, structural concerns, regulatory scrutiny that intensified after the MAX disasters made aviation authorities globally unwilling to rubber stamp anything with Boeing's name on it. 2020 became 2022, then 2025. Now the realistic first delivery date sits somewhere around 2027, 7 years late. Tens of billions in additional charges, and a backlog of customers who had been waiting so long that some started asking whether the aircraft would ever actually arrive. Boeing needed a signal, not just for the airlines, for the financial markets, for its own workforce. The company has been bleeding. Production scandals, quality control failures, caught on camera. A CEO departure that made the news for all the wrong reasons. Boeing's stock has been on a multi-year journey that no investor wants to describe out loud. 100 777X orders from China would be more than a commercial win. It would be a rescue narrative. And Boeing knows exactly how powerful that narrative is. Here is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. Deals announced during political summits, and this one appears tied to high-level diplomatic engagement between Washington and Beijing, have a specific history in aviation. They are often real. They are also often not what they appear to be on the day they are announced. A memorandum of understanding is not a purchase agreement. A letter of intent is not a delivery schedule. The aviation industry has seen summit announcements become firm contracts. It has also seen summit announcements quietly evaporate 6 months later when the political temperature changed. The 100 aircraft number that is circulating right now may represent genuine commitment. It may also represent both governments' need to show a win at a moment when the relationship needs visible momentum. What makes this different? What makes serious analysts take it more seriously than a typical diplomatic prop is the industrial logic. Underneath it, Chinese carriers genuinely need wide-body aircraft. The math is not manufactured. China's middle class is expanding faster than its airlines can build international networks to serve them. Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern are all projecting massive growth in long-haul international travel over the next 2 decades. And the aircraft they need for those routes, the heavy long-range jets that connect Shanghai to Sao Paulo or Beijing to London, do not come from COMAC. The C919 is a narrow body, it flies domestic routes. It is not an A350. It is not a 777X for wide-body international expansion. China still has only 2 real options, Airbus or Boeing. And Airbus has had a 5-year head start. That is the competitive reality Boeing is walking into. Airbus did not sit still while Boeing was in exile. The A350-1000, which competes directly with the 777-9, the higher capacity variant of the 777X family, has been accumulating service hours with Chinese operators. Pilots are trained on it. Maintenance infrastructure is built around it. When airlines evaluate which aircraft to order, familiarity and established support networks carry enormous weight. Airbus built those networks in China, while Boeing's sales teams were waiting for diplomatic thaw. So if Boeing does close this deal, if the 100 aircraft become real contracts with real delivery positions, it will not be because China defaulted back to an old preference. It will be because Boeing offered something compelling enough to break 5 years of institutional momentum in the other direction. What that offer looks like matters. Pricing, obviously. At list prices, a 777X aircraft is a $40 to $50 billion order. Airlines never pay list price. The discount structure Boeing is willing to accept will say a great deal about how desperate the company actually is. Delivery positions matter to Chinese carriers, need to know when their aircraft will actually arrive, and a program already 7 years behind schedule does not inspire easy confidence. And then there is the question that sits at the center of all of this, the one that the leaked number does not answer. What does China actually want from this deal? Because a purchase of this scale, even accounting for genuine fleet need, is never purely commercial. Not between the United States and China. Not right now. Not when trade negotiations, technology restrictions, and geopolitical positioning are all active simultaneously. When China buys American aircraft in significant quantities, it moves money. It also moves political capital. It signals something to Washington. It signals something to Beijing's domestic audience. It signals something to COMAC, which spent a decade being told it was the future of Chinese aviation and may now watch the government that funded it place 100 orders with the American manufacturer it was built to replace. That last point deserves more attention than it is getting. The C919 is not just an aircraft, it is a national project. It represents China's stated ambition to build a domestic aviation industry capable of competing with Boeing and Airbus on a global level. If Chinese carriers, with government blessing, now turn around and commit to 100 Boeing 777X jets, they are implicitly acknowledging something the C919's existence was supposed to make unnecessary. That for serious long-haul international operations, China still needs Boeing, that COMAC is not ready, that the decade of investment and political will that produced the C919 has not yet produced an aircraft that China trusts with its most important routes. That is a complicated message for the Chinese government to send to itself. It suggests that whatever is driving this deal, it runs deeper than a diplomatic gesture. There is one more thing worth sitting with: Boeing's 777X. If it enters service in 2027, as currently projected, will compete in a market that has been waiting for it for 7 years. The airlines that committed early, Emirates, Lufthansa, Cathay Pacific, have built route strategies around an aircraft they have never actually operated. If China now joins that list with a 100 aircraft commitment, the program's survival is not in question. The 777X gets built. It gets delivered. It becomes the backbone of international wide-body fleets for the next 30 years. But if the deal collapses, if the political relationship shifts again, if the 100 aircraft become 50 or 20, or a press release that quietly fades Boeing's position in China does not return to where it was before the MAX crisis, it returns to something worse, because this time the expectation of recovery will have existed and then failed. And in aviation, failed expectations have long memories. The next few weeks will likely bring an official announcement. Numbers will be confirmed or revised.